Hello, as usual, the quick little forewarning to this. This is all done in just one take. It is kind of just a relaxed read through as I normally do them. It's not by any means professional, but it's a story that I enjoy greatly, that I wish to share and put out online in my, I don't want to say rendition of it, but if you've seen the other videos, you know the drill. So, yeah. John dies at the end. Chapter 6. Meet Dr. Marconi. That sucked. I pried my eyes open, feeling scratchy little bits in there that could either be sand or glass. I worked the lids open and found myself staring at dirt. Everything was upside down. I was hanging by my seatbelt. Felt like every single joint in my body had been wrenched painfully out of socket. It was agony from head to toe, so dark now that it took me a moment to realize that the massive spreading pool down on the ceiling was not motor oil, but blood. I craned my neck over and saw hunks of meat flying off what had been Officer Freeman/Appleton in juicy, ragged, pink and yellow layers, bone and ribs and a spongy mass that must have been lungs. Out from the meaty shreds came rushing masses of the tiny white demon rod things, swirling around the interior of the truck like rice in a blender. That's not what caused me to panic. Not that or the faint, wet, ripping sounds next to me. No, what got me moving, what sent me clutching to the seatbelt clasp, was the sound of the swarm. Oh, that sound. Not something coming through my ears at all, but a kind of shrill electricity in my brain. A million sharp, spiky, poison thoughts ricocheting around my head. Imagine 50,000 men trapped on a desert island, deprived of food and water and sex, but somehow kept alive for 50,000 years. Then, after they've been tormented 100 steps beyond insanity, tortured past self-mutilation and cannibalism, somebody drops off a sculpture of a naked woman made from T-bone steaks. If you could then capture the sound of them simultaneously fucking and eating and tearing her to shreds and broadcast it into the center of your skull at 10,000 watts, it would still sound absolutely nothing like what I heard. It was madness and desperation and deprivation and torment gone supernova, screeches and howls, and sprinkled in here and there my own name. It blew every thought out of my head, tore my mind open. I was frantic, patting around for the clasp of the seatbelt with hands shaking like a Parkinson's patient. I could vaguely hear actual screams around me, right from the back seat, but they might as well have been 1,000 miles away. These little white streaks were buzzing around my face now, past my ears, skipping over my skin. I got my fingers around the little plastic box that held the seatbelt, but couldn't find a button, couldn't see it, pressed and pulled, and finally just started clawing at it like a little kid in a tantrum. I felt this itching over my bare arms, and then little pricks like needles, and I knew what it was. I fucking knew. And I started contorting my body to crawl free from the belt like an animal wrenching from a trap. Movement all around me in the darkness. Glass shattering in the back seat. Somebody getting dragged out. Screaming. I ran my hand over my forearm, and 1,000 of the rods scattered off into the air. I heard a resulting uproar in the voices, shrieks like teenage banshees at a boy band concert, except nothing like that at all. The sound, it was so massive, and yet so compressed in my skull that it was a physical pressure against my temples. I thought I could feel wheezing, creaking fissures in the bone. Then, hands were grabbing me, pulling at the seatbelt. A hand came into view, and with a flick, there was suddenly a narrow blade there, a switchblade cutting at the strap. I fell free, crashed down. 4 hands were dragging me out of the wreckage by the shirt and shoulders, my back scraping over a bed of glass bits. It was Fred, Shum, and John pulling me free. Everybody was yelling, freaking out. Molly was dancing around and barking, total panic at the sight of the little cloud of white insects blowing around me like pillow feathers. The worms had settled on my arm again and were landing on my neck and face. I brushed them off, swatted at them in the air. John seized my arm by the wrist, dug out the brown bottle of alcohol from his pants, and doused the arm with it. This seemed to annoy the flying worm things more than anything, and my skin was on fire with their attempt to dig their way in. I sputtered, "That ain't helping. The alcohol isn't hurting the—" John flicked his lighter and set my arm on fire. I said before that my skin was on fire with the pain being confronted so soon after that sentiment with the actual experience. I admit the other thing was nothing like my skin actually being on fire. But even the white heat on my arm was nothing next to the pain that suddenly erupted inside my skull. Hundreds of the worms were burned alive, and the psychic outcry was like shoving my head inside a 747 engine. It was a nuclear bomb of sound, earth-shattering, feeling like an explosion of razor blades in my cranium. And then, silence. John was rolling my arm in the dust, patting out the flames. The skin was beet red and peeling in places. I sat up, tried to focus my eyes, tried to get to my feet, fell back down on my ass. I saw John had blood running down his forehead, and he was trying to wipe it from his eyes. The empty liqueur bottle at his feet. He leaned over and puked. Jennifer was on her knees in the dirt and had a chunk missing from her upper thigh, and her hair was matted to the side with blood. Big Jim was pointing and screaming. Molly was barking. Fred, screaming, thrashing around as if on fire. The swarm had found him. The flying worms poured out of the wrecked SUV like a kicked hornet's nest. All landed on Fred. He was coughing, choking, the rods gushing into his wide-open mouth. In 5 seconds, it was over. Fred collapsed. We all knew he wasn't dead. Jim and John and Molly stared toward Fred in dull shock, a silence settling over the scene so heavy it was almost a solid thing. Only Jennifer moved. She sprinted toward the dead SUV, a little squirt of blood jumping from her leg with each step. She crawled in, grabbed something, then backed out quickly. Fred moved. He twitched, flopped onto his back, then clumsily got to his feet. Everybody flinched and took steps backward. I forced myself to my feet over the protest of leg muscles. Fred, if it was still Fred, looked confused for a moment, then brushed himself off and said, "It's okay, guys. I'm okay. I'm okay." Jennifer ran up and I saw what she had retrieved from the SUV. It was Morgan's shotgun. The thing was gleaming in the moonlight with a layer of tacky blood. Without asking, Jim took it from her and checked the chamber to see if a shell was loaded. He laid it over his shoulder like he was suddenly the captain of the crew. He said, "We gotta get a car, guys. Somehow." Nobody moved. Jennifer looked at me expectantly. What was I supposed to do? I could barely keep my feet. I looked Fred dead in the eyes, searching them. I said to Fred, "Go flag down a car." Jim nodded like this was a perfectly good plan and followed Fred as he walked toward the highway. Jennifer gave me an exasperated look, went up to Jim and tore the gun from his hands. He spun, asked her what the heck she was doing. She backed away from him, and I half expected her to blow a hole through the infested Fred with a shotgun. She didn't. Instead, she went right to me and pushed the gun into my hands. Very slowly and carefully, Big Jim said to me, "What are you going to do with that, David?" John, Jen, and I stood side by side, facing Fred and Jim from about 10 feet away. Fred said, "Whoa, guys, we're all shook up here, okay?" Jennifer said, "Jim, were you not paying attention to what just happened? That's not Fred. Not anymore." "We don't know what happened," snapped Jim, glancing over at Fred. "Does anybody here understand this? Really? Screw you if you think you do." Fred said, "Guys, look, I don't know what you think you saw, but I'm still Fred in here. Ask me anything. I'm me. I mean, we were all in that car when the cop exploded. Any of us could be infected or whatever, but we gotta hang together. We're like the fucking good guys here, right?" Everyone looked at me. I was the armed one. I looked down, as if deferring to the shotgun. It was cold, heavy, and sticky with Morgan's blood. A breeze blew past us. From my right, Molly let out a low growl. I closed my eyes, let out a long breath, and said, "Go flag down a car." Big Jim and Fred turned once more and took a step toward the highway. I let out a breath, took 2 steps forward. I raised the shotgun and blew Fred's head off his shoulders. Blood flew. I saw it mist in the moonlight, for a split second, frozen in the air like a snapshot. There was that feeling again, the sparks in my head, the old violence high, the electricity of it shivering through me. Fred's body slumped to its knees, then fell flat on his chest. Blood, screaming, panic, the old familiar sights and sounds. I had been here before. Big Jim recoiled, splattered with Fred's blood, yelling something I couldn't hear. Everything was dull, slow. I craned my head to see John, and he had an expression I had seen there a few times before, something like fear and pity. I wanted to put the butt of the shotgun through his face. I loathed that look. It said, "You are what you are, Dave, and that's that." I caught a glimpse of Jen, her hands clasped over her mouth. This seemed like such a fucking good idea 10 seconds ago, didn't it? There was movement out the corner of my eye, and it was Big Jim stomping toward me, rage lighting up his face. That was a familiar look for him, too. Seen in a dozen high school fights, his fists about to come loose like fighting dogs tearing out of their cages. Yeah, Jim, you can quote the Bible to me, but you and I got the same sickness. I aimed the shotgun right at his face. Jim looked into the barrel, took 2 more steps, then raised his eyes to meet mine. He stopped, his eyes never moving from mine. He said, "The day after the Hitchcock thing, back in school, I saw you and your buddies, laughing in the hallway. Not 12 hours after Billy died. I know all about you, Dave. You got the devil in—" I pumped the shotgun. "This is not a conversation, Jim." Every muscle was tensed. We faced off that way, seemingly forever, the trigger pressing into the skin of my finger. Shoot him. Shoot everybody. John broke the moment. He sprinted up toward Fred's prone body, grabbing and dragging it. "Get him to the truck!" Jennifer went to help him, but the two of them were making slow, halting progress, pulling the dead weight through the sand. John said, "Dave, these things are starting to come out of him." Jim stared me down for a long moment longer and then turned and walked toward them. John muttered something to him, but Big Jim knocked both him and Jen aside. He dragged Fred's body back to the wreckage of the SUV and laid him against the rear door. A familiar fuzzy cloud was emerging from the ragged stump that had been Fred Chu's head. Jim stomped toward me, and then, with a quick, impossibly strong movement, easily ripped the shotgun from my hands. He turned and aimed at the gas tank of the SUV. I flinched from the expected explosion, had the sudden crazy urge from a ball of fire to spew out and reduce all of us to ash. Nothing. Instead, there was a patch of little holes in the metal, a heavy rain of gasoline splattering down the rear and onto the prone body of Fred Chu. John stepped up to his corpse, flicked open his lighter, and tossed it down. Fred Chu went up in a ball of flames. The fire licked up the trunk of the SUV, reached the gas tank, and ignited the contents with a heavy, metallic thunk, sending us flopping to the ground, little bits of metal plunking softly into the sand around us. Jim got to his feet and walked toward me, the shotgun pointed at the ground. The adrenaline was draining from me so fast I thought I'd be sitting in a puddle of it soon. So tired. So tired. 2 feet away, Jim raised the gun. "Man, just do it. Just do it and let me sleep out here in the sand until the sun goes supernova and turns the whole world into a charred memory." He threw the shotgun in my gut and walked away. The barrel was warm. We all got to our feet and watched thousands of the little particles swarm out of Fred, burning like sparks over a stirred campfire. In my head, the concept of damned voices faded and died. John said, "Do you think that's all of them? The worms, whatever they are? Do you think we got all of them?" I didn't answer, because I got a feeling that if just a few of them get away, hell, if just one of them gets out and gets into a body, they'll multiply, lay eggs, and do what they do. Nobody answered. What was there to say? It took us 15 minutes to flag down a car. I convinced Jennifer to stand out by the road alone, shivering in must and looking victimized, one shapely leg coated in crimson. Soon a shiny new SUV pulled over, driven by a young guy and his wife on their honeymoon or whatever. As soon as their passenger door was open, I sprinted out and put the gun in their face, forced them out while Jim apologized profusely, swearing he would bring it back. The 5 of us and the dog piled in and we drove into the night. "I don't like it," said Jennifer softly, as if afraid the looming dark thing on the horizon could hear us. She was looking at the Luxor Las Vegas Hotel, a pyramid jutting into the night sky, big and black and geometric like something from the year 3000. We were parked in the lot of a massive neon-lined steakhouse, maybe a quarter-mile away, all of us beaten and stinking of smoke and looking like war refugees. We had ducked into a truck stop restroom just outside of the city and washed as much blood off ourselves as we could. Jim spat out 2 teeth. John was pretty sure he had a concussion and would still be vomiting if he had anything in his stomach. I had double vision in one eye, and in general, I felt like I had been run through a wood chipper. We bought 4 first aid kits and fixed ourselves up as best we could. Jennifer patched her thigh with a roll of ace bandages and a tampon. We bought armloads of convenience store food and sat eating as we drove around looking for the Luxor. This parking lot was as far as we got before somebody asked what the plan was. "The Justin thing is in there, right now," Jim said, nodding toward the Luxor. "So what are we waiting for? This whole thing. It could be going down right this minute for all we know, and we're out here doing nothing." John said, "If he summoned Satan, we'd see it from here, right?" This was the most that any of us had spoken since the accident and the ensuing clusterfuck. I said, "First problem is we gotta get into this thing. Guy like Marconi probably attracts a lot of nut jobs. Gotta think the doors will be guarded, and I don't particularly feel like shooting my way in there." Jim said, "Think, David. The seance or whatever it is happening inside a casino. You won't get 5 feet inside the door with a gun before 9 guys in suits tackle you." "And shove your head in a vice," John added helpfully. I said, "Well, I don't like our chances without the gun, unless Jim wants to try to quote Bible verses at it." Jennifer put up her hands, said, "Guys, let's not make this a dick-measuring contest, okay?" There was silence for a moment, then John said, "That's good, because it wouldn't be no contest at all." Silence again. "That is, I'm referring to my cock being bigger than either of yours." I sighed and said, "John, I don't think anyone in this vehicle is in the mood to—" "John, let's make one thing clear," Jim said, cutting me off into his most stern evangelical voice. "Every man is blessed with his gifts from the Lord. One of mine happens to be a penis large enough that, if it had a penis of its own, my penis's penis would be larger than your penis." There was a moment of stunned silence. Then I heard Jen start laughing so hard I thought she would choke. "Fuck all of you," John retorted. "You don't even exist. were all just a figment of my cock's imagination. Jim tried to suppress his laughter and failed. One more victim, sucked in by John. You get in the room with him and you just fall into a warm pool of beer and video games and penis jokes, staring out at the universe with him and saying, "Do you believe this shit?" I thought, not for the first time, that John could probably start a pretty fucking successful cult. I looked down at the shotgun in my lap, a heavy, cold, hateful thing still coated in grit and blood. I noticed something else, a broad lump in my pants pocket. I dug into it and pulled out the folded envelope of cash I had gotten from the alley gut yesterday. I wondered if I wound up not using it if I should go find the guy and give it back to him. From behind me, Molly barked. John was looking off across the parking lot now, where a massive customized RV sat like a beached whale. Behind it was an 18-wheeler, painted white with neon outlines, some kind of logo airbrushed on the side. He asked, "Wonder what's in there?" Big Jim said, "Shipment of fags, probably." The asshole's a comedian all of a sudden. This seemed to anger Molly, who stared out the windshield and went into a barking frenzy. I reached back and, for the first time in my life, smacked the dog across the nose with an envelope full of cash. Jennifer said, "Thank you." John said, "There might be some clothes in that RV. We could change, look normal, get Dave an overcoat to conceal the gun, then charge into the Luxor, find Justin, and open a can of kill-ass." "We can't break into somebody's RV," I said. John squinted at the logo on the side of the truck. "That RV doesn't belong to a person. It belongs to Elton John. You know, the band." Jen said, "Seriously?" Molly retreated to the rear and started biting at the luggage the newlyweds had stacked in it. They probably had packed some sausages in there or something. John said, "Yeah, look at the sign. I bet the truck is their concert stuff." Jim said, "Elton John is a guy, not a band." "Please, don't get him started," I said. "There was that one video where he was in different outfits, and for the last time, those were all different guys. Dave, I looked up. They're brothers." "Oh, Jesus, forget it. Who cares?" I gripped the shotgun and considered shooting myself in the head. A slow smile spread over John's face. He turned to me and said the most horrifying words he knows. "Dave, I have a plan." If the aliens who helped the Egyptians build the pyramids returned to Earth and opened a casino, it would look like the Luxor Las Vegas. The thing was a massive, gleaming, black glass pyramid with a line of white lights that pulsed up its four corners. We had just pulled into the Luxor parking lot and were watching two cop cars and a tow truck messing with Justin's abandoned beer hauler, which had been carelessly run up under the curb. The cops and tow guy all looked a little confused by the scene. I said, "Let's go." We filed out of the SUV and strode toward the front entrance, giving the cops a wide berth. Jennifer looked up at it and whispered to me, "I don't like this place." "You already said that." "It looks like the end of the world, somehow. Like those huge, scary future buildings in Blade Runner. Black with the fire coming out the tops and all that." Big Jim said, Yeah, and those gigantic big screens with huge Asian women on them. I watched that movie when I was a kid and I started crying." Big Jim adjusted his cape. The entrance was ahead, opened wide like a maw, the guts inside showing gleaming solid gold. "You know what else scared me?" Jen said, reaching up to scratch where a bundle of black feathers was tickling her neck. "Independence Day. That alien invasion movie. The first part, where the aliens come and they look up between the buildings and the sky is gone and, like, all they see is metal, just as far as you can see, that steel ship looming up there. I remember thinking, that's what the end of the world will look like. It won't be wars or meteor. It'll be something we never could have thought of." Awe choked off her voice. We all entered the lobby and stopped in our tracks. The cavernous inner chamber of the Luxor was gold upon gold, gold floors, gold walls, gold ceiling. The place was a temple, and there was no question who God was. The lobby was a pulsing crowd of people, and we were pushed ahead by the current. Everyone stared at us as they passed, eyes flicking from me to Jen to John's naked ass. I nervously adjusted the guitar strap around my neck. The shotgun was at my side, concealed under my coat. We probably drew the eyes of a dozen security guys working the floor, but at the sight of us, not a single one of them was thinking, gun. They were thinking, retards, sure, but not gun. John said, "Over there." He had found an entrance labeled Egyptian Ballroom, outside of which were two huge stand-up posters featuring a smiling 50-something man who must have been Dr. Marconi, since his name was boldly displayed under the picture. A lady sat at a table with a laptop PC and stacks of programs and brochures fanned out on a table. There were two guys in suits with thin cell phone headsets on, guarding the door. We strode toward them. My heart skipped a beat. This is as far as we had planned. As we neared, I glanced at the partially open door to see if anything was happening in there, such as Lucifer crashing up to the floor. He wasn't. What I could see was that the ballroom was huge, a floor like half a football field. In the center was an enormous ice sculpture that had to have been 15 feet high. It was an angel with its wings spread, hands upstretched to the ceiling. It must have had water pumping up through it because a rain of liquid rolled off its crystalline wings like a waterfall, splashing into a pool at its feet. The crowd sat in rows of folding chairs around it. Every seat was taken. Each member of the audience had their eyes closed. The amplified voice of Dr. Marconi drifted into the lobby. "Okay, everyone, settle down. I know this is frightening for some of you, but what we are dealing with is real. Real as the person sitting next to you. But I need all of you, all of your concentration, all of that power, that openness of the mind for this to work. Now, we've just heard from Betty, who says her husband disappeared under mysterious circumstances last year. His name is Harold Alexander. Let's all concentrate on Harold Alexander. Now clear your minds. Each of you picture in your head an apple." I left the $6,000 for my envelope with a pony-tailed roadie who gave us 15 minutes alone with the concert truck when he went off to smoke. The guitar slung over my back was made entirely of a crystal-clear glass or polymer. I was wearing a white leather overcoat trimmed in long, luxuriant green fur, and an enormous white sombrero edged in a pattern of fiber-optic lights. Jennifer had donned a tailed white tuxedo/ringmaster coat over her t-shirt and shorts, the coat long enough to leave only bare legs emerging from the hem. A black feather boa gave her an outfit that sort of looked intentional. Big Jim was wearing an incredibly tight roadie jumpsuit with a flashy Elton John logo on the back. He had a huge Casio keyboard under his arm and pushed a dolly behind him, loaded with two black boxes the size of footlockers. John wore a black jockstrap, a pair of white chaps, and a small purple Robin Hood cape that covered his groin. He was naked from the waist up, save for a tight leather vest and a bundle of gold chains. We all wore sunglasses. As we arrived at the table, Marconi's voice boomed. Now, everyone be calm. Who's next? Does anyone else have someone they'd like to contact?" The guards and check-in ladies stared at us in confused amusement as we approached. The lady at the table, trying to suppress a smile, finally said, Do you have tickets?" John said, "No, we're Elton John." "We're, the band," I said, cutting him off quickly. "We're playing in there after the seance. Show us the back entrance and we'll—" "Dave!" shouted John. "Look!" It was Shitload. He was at the far end of the ballroom, shuffling between seats, moving toward the stage. He wore an ill-fitting suit jacket, jeans, and a cowboy hat that we knew covered a lumpy head wound. "Yo, I got an old homie I'd like you to contact for me, fool," he said as he approached Marconi. Dr. Marconi's smile faltered at the sight of Shitload, limping with joints bent at odd angles, his body puffy and stretched as if he were ready to burst. The jacket didn't completely conceal the gaping shotgun wound in his midsection. Shitload said, "His name is Korok the Slave Master from the 8th Plane, also known in some realms as Bob, and in others as the Lord Xanth Albs Kill Shadalaladas Laxlaksnas." The guards and the door lady all turned their attention to him, not sure if this was part of the show, but sensing something was about to go way, way wrong. I stepped up to the door and ran my hand along the side, felt the long, rigid shotgun hiding behind my overcoat. I was about to tell door lady that we were in the midst of an emergency that only rock and roll could solve, and thus had to be let in at once. "Gun!" It was the guard to my left. I looked down, realized 6 inches of shotgun barrel was exposed where my coat had folded back. Quickly I whipped it out and pointed at his face, freezing him in his mid-lunge. John said, "It's not a gun, it's part of our act." At the exact same moment I said, "I'm a cop, I'm undercover." Then, over the loudspeaker, "Ah, my balls!" I spun and saw Dr. Marconi fall to the floor, grabbing his punctured groin. Shitload loomed over him. Gasps rippled across the audience. I sprinted into the ballroom. Guards muscled past me, rushing the stage. Shitload punched the first guard in the groin so hard it flung his body back 5 feet. The other retreated. I raised the shotgun, leveling it at Shitload. "Freeze!" I shouted, for some reason. A lady screamed at the sight of the gun. Shitload turned his back to us and leaned forward. His pants split. A fleshy, puckering protrusion formed and pushed its way through the slit, looking like the end of a flesh trumpet. Thump! With a bassy thump and a smell like burnt sulfur, Shitload farted himself far into the air. The crowd went wild, chairs clanging down all around us. I tracked Shitload with the barrel of the shotgun as he climbed a hazy contrail of shimmery methane. He landed atop the giant ice angel. Shitload crouched on one wing, raised his arm in a touchdown motion, and said something at the top of his voice that was probably very profound and ominous, but was drowned out by the audience bedlam in the crowd below. I fired. Shitload exploded. Hey, that was easy. An eruption of blood and hamburger stained the wings of the angel red and pink. I felt a momentary euphoria of victory, ready to be carried off on shoulders. I should have known better. Out of Justin's guts poured not the white buzzing worms, but a shower of black specks that could have been coffee beans. They bounced and flecked off the wings of the angel and plinked into the water below. I edged up to the pool with the shotgun. Dark shapes started writhing and splashing below the surface. Oh, shit. A soft hand landed on my shoulder, and I turned to see the sharp brown eyes of Albert Marconi. Son, I think we need to get the people out of here. Big Jim was behind him, still toting the keyboard. Marconi said, patiently, "Don't you think? We haven't much time." I turned, ran, fired the shotgun into the air, and shouted, "Bomb! There's a bomb on the fountain! Everybody run for your lives! Please don't not panic!" The words were completely lost in the stampede caused by my shotgun blast. I bumped into John in the crowd. "Where's the bomb?" "There's no bomb. There's something in the... Guys!" It was Jen. She was yelling and pointing at the fountain. I turned just as one of the 7-legged wig monsters flung itself out of the pool in a spray of water. The beast landed on the carpet on its little baby-like hands, looked around, meowed, then disappeared. In a blink, it was clinging to the back of an elderly black woman. Scorpion tail burrowed down into the base of her spine. Another of the little black beasts emerged. Another, then 3 more. They crawled, leapt, clamped themselves on the victims. A fat guy went falling past me with one of the things on his chest. A bearded man was trying to shake one off his leg. One of the wig monsters ran and jumped at Jim. He swatted it like a baseball with his Elton John keyboard, then bashed the heavy Casio in half over its prone body in a spray of white and black keys. Jen was on the other side of the fountain, kicking one of the beasts to death. I ran toward her, blew a wig monster in half, worked the pump, and realized I had no more shots. I flung the gun at another one of the monsters, missed, hit an elderly man in a wheelchair instead, toppling him over. I was kicking through the sea of blue chairs, closing on Jen. 2 of the wig beasts were bearing down on me. No, 3. One of them crouched and launched itself at me. Thunk! The beast was batted away by a folding chair wielded by John. He screamed, "Yeah!" in a dead-on impersonation of pro wrestler Macho Man Randy Savage. Grasping the folded chair by 2 legs, he swung again and flattened another of the beasts, screaming, "Have a seat, bitch!" There were at least 100 of the wig monsters bouncing around the ballroom now. Victims littered the floor by the dozens. I flinched at the sound of a sharp gunshot, spun to see a middle-aged lady holding a little chrome pistol. She shot one of the things, killed it, took shots at another, missed. The beasts gained up on her, 3 stinging her simultaneously. I heard someone shout, "Becky!" from behind me. A tall guy with a heavy brown beard pushed through the crowd. "Becky! Honey!" He punted 2 of the creatures off his wife with several furious kicks. Then John ran in and shared the last one, screaming, "You've been sentenced to get the chair, motherfucker!" The man helped his wife to her feet and said to me, "Those things, they're blocking the exits." I spun around, saw black clumps surrounding the doors we came in. Shit! The woman looked dazed. The man asked her if she was okay. She nodded, then calmly reached over with her left arm and tore the right arm out of its socket. It made a slimy sucking sound, like tearing the leg off a Thanksgiving turkey. There was no blood. The wound was instantly sealed by a thin black layer of the soy sauce. She calmly walked back toward the fountain, casually carrying her arm like an umbrella. Her husband stood in dumbfounded silence. I heard John land 2 more blows with the chair. Another bite victim lay nearby, a young man writhing as if in a seizure. Eventually, his legs kicked themselves free from the rest of his body. The limbs thumped along the floor on their own like 2 giant polyester snakes with shoes for heads. Right behind them was a loose head stuck to a single arm, furiously biting and clawing the carpet. I felt like we might not be in control of this situation any longer. I heard a scream that I had come to recognize as Jennifer's. She was on her knees with Fred's switchblade, surrounded by 5 dead wig monsters, all bearing ragged stab wounds. I sprinted that way. I heard a metallic thump from behind me and heard John yell, "You want this committee, asshole? Then you best meet with that chair!" I pulled Jen to her feet. Around us, the disembodied human limbs were piling up, forming a circle around the fountain, fusing themselves to each other like Satan's Lego set. A wet, pink, disembodied spine slithered past us like a snake. Dr. Marconi jogged toward us, shouting some instruction I couldn't hear in the pandemonium. All around us, the wig monsters were closing in, their dark shapes rolling in toward the fountain like oil down a drain. One of them jumped onto Jen's back. I flung myself at it, grabbed it in a bear hug, and ripped it off of her. One of its little fists came around and started punching me in the face. I carried it to the fountain, stepping over a squishy pile of body parts. I shoved the monster into the water, held it under, screamed, "Die!" or something to that effect. After a few seconds, it stopped moving, and black sauce oozed out of it like an oil slick. Dr. Marconi got close enough so I could finally hear him. He said, "They're trying to get into the water! Don't let them!" I looked back down at the spreading black pool, heard a splash as another of the beasts jumped in, followed by another, the creatures returning to the pool from which they had sprung. Nothing good could come from that. Marconi said, Follow me. We sprinted toward a set of doors behind the stage, John smacking creatures with chairs as we went. Marconi unlocked the door, and we filed in. John stopped and spun in front of the open doorway. He faced at least half a dozen of the wig monsters circling in on him. He whipped the chair around and actually split one of the things in half with the impact, spilling a spray of blood that was reflective, like mercury. John bellowed, "Anybody else want to donate blood to charity?" He ducked into the door, stopped, thought for a moment, then flung the door open again. He swung the chair and bashed into one monster right in the wig, screaming, "There's some dessert with a cherry on top." He came back in again, breathing heavily, slamming the door just as something thumped against it. I said, "How about we just stay in here until they all leave?" Dr. Marconi took off his glasses and cleaned them with a handkerchief. John said, "What's happening to them out there? The bite victims?" He looked at Marconi. "We've got friends who took the soy sauce, the venom those things were out there spit out. Almost all of them died, but not like—" "Out there you have a room full of true believers," Marconi said sadly. "There's a shift that goes on, you see, physically and mentally and spiritually. They were ripe for this." Something hammered against the door and one hinge popped out in a burst of plaster dust. But Big Jim and John leaned against the door to brace it. I said, "Wait, you know what's going on here?" He gave me a dismissive look. "I'll send you home with a copy of my book." Big Jim said, "He's trying to break through, isn't he?" Marconi nodded. "He or his lackeys, yes." "God damn it," I screamed. "Did everybody else know this was going to happen but me?" "I most certainly did not know this was going to happen," Marconi said, "or I would have canceled and issued full refunds. But when I became aware of this sauce, as you call it, I knew that it had only one purpose." There was a scratching from the opposite side of the door that I suspected was the sound of the beasts trying to bite through it. "And that purpose is?" "I offer people a window into the spiritual. Someone wishes to turn it into a door." A blue eye in the darkness. Jim whispered, "The devil." Marconi said, "Son, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world there was only one of him." I held up a hand in a halt motion and said, "How do we get out of this?" Marconi placed his glasses back on his nose and said, "We're like one German soldier alone on the beaches of Normandy on D-Day, holding a sharp stick. I assure you, son, if any of us were capable of destroying such evil, the world would have killed us long before now. The world turns, son, and now it turns into the darkness." I said, "So, what do you suggest?" "I'm a retired priest. Did you know that?" John asked, "Are you one of those priests who can shoot lasers out of their eyes? Because that would be really helpful right now." "No," he said, "but I can bless water to make it holy. The ice statue, I mean." John's face brightened and he said, "That's perfect." He thrust his index finger into the air. "We bless the ice, then we just have to somehow get all 100 or so of those monsters to go lick the statue." I stared hard into the face of the older man, said, "Okay, there is no possible combination of English words that would form a dumber plan than that." "We'll need to buy time, of course," he said, undeterred. "But if I'm right, if they're doing what I think they're doing, it's most likely the only hope we've got. The travelers out there, the beasts I mean, they do have a weakness." John said, "We know. Chairs." Not exactly. They're natural discordians. It's a product of where they're from, you see. When you live in a world of black noise, melody is like a blade to the ears, angels and their harps and all that." I asked, "What does that have to do with—" A hole exploded from the center of the door. A little pink fist and a segmented leg curled through, reaching around between John and Big Jim. John grabbed it by the wrist and Jennifer severed the arm with a switchblade. There was a feline shriek from the other side. John held the detached arm in his hand for a moment, then shoved it back through the ragged hole. Marconi said, "I see you have your instruments. Can any of you sing?" The old spirituals work best. John said, "I can sing." I said, "No, you can't, John." "Well, I play the guitar." "So can I," said Big Jim, "but we have 2 guitars." I said, "This could not be any stupider." John said, "Dave, you recall the words to Camel Holocaust?" "Ah, once again, you prove me wrong, John." Marconi looked down at the 2 carts stacked with amps and Campbells and said, "How long is it? I'll need several minutes." John stepped around and lifted the guitar off my back and said, "Camel Holocaust is as long as you want it to be, my friend. I'm lead, Jim is rhythm, Jen sings backup. Jen, just repeat everything Dave sings, only like 1 second behind. The sound systems will be on the stage. We duck out there, plug it in the wall, okay? Guys, this is just retarded enough to work." We set up, then faced the banging door. John said, "You know, I'm surprised the door stopped them. Since they can teleport around like that, you'd think they could just blink right through it." There was a sudden silence from behind the door, a muttering like the creatures had just realized something. From behind me, Jim screamed. One of the beasts was on his back. A second appeared on his chest, and in a blurred motion it snatched at his throat. Jim collapsed on his guitar. the white instrument instantly turning crimson. Jennifer lunged with the switchblade and stabbed one beast to death. She was good with that thing. I said, "Jim, are you—" He rolled over, his throat laying open in shreds and flaps as if it had been hit with a shotgun blast. His eyes were wide, his mouth working. Then he was gone. I opened my mouth to say something when suddenly my vision was obstructed by blackness. There were little pinches on my chest and belly like something grabbing hold. My vision focused and I saw a dozen mismatched eyes staring back at me. I fell backward, hit the ground, the wig monster riding on my chest. Its beak opened and I saw a pink human tongue lolling around inside. An electric shriek emerged from the ballroom, a guitar. The creature closed its beak and turned toward the open door where John played, a look of intense annoyance on its face. It trotted away, two tiny hands over its ears. Marconi said, "Good, go." I stood and pushed through the open door. John played his axe with his legs spread apart, holding the guitar low to the ground. I sprinted around him, grabbed the mic off the stage. For a moment I was speechless. The base of the fountain was now hidden behind a 7-foot-high circle of stacked body parts, the ice angel rising from the center. The remaining wig monsters gathered around the perimeter, facing inward as if waiting. There is no possible way this is actually happening. Well, might as well go with it. I clenched my throat, filled my lungs with until my diaphragm pushed out against the gold-plated belt I was wearing and screeched. "I knew a man! No, I made that part up! Hair, hair, hair! Camel Holocaust! Camel Holocaust!" The creature spun our way, donned some very disappointed frowns, backed away. "Brilliant!" shouted Marconi. "You're really annoying them! Let's move!" We pushed forward through the fountain, the sound of the music thundering through the room, scattering the beasts before us like a leaf blower. One of the wig monsters spat at me. "My mellow soul, crushed by your Gallagher of apathy. Sledgehammer, hammer, camel holocaust, camel holocaust." We reached the length of our cables, still some distance from the fountain. Marconi went forward with Jennifer in tow. They got within blessing distance of the angel, and Marconi said, "Father, you give us your grace through sacramental signs, which tells us of the wonders of your unseen power. In baptism, we use your gift of water, which you have made a rich symbol of the grace you give us in this sacrament. At the very dawn of creation, there's a wolf behind you. No, wait, it's just a dog. Oh shit, badger, badger. Camel holocaust, camel holocaust." We hit the first solo. John ripped into it. Several of the wig monsters were now chewing on John's guitar wire. The sound died into faint, pathetic guitar pluckings. The monsters lurched toward us in mass. John, thinking quickly, ran over and snatched the microphone from my hand. He began making guitar sounds with his mouth. I didn't think that would work. I spun at Dr. Marconi, saw him stepping up over the human parts wall toward the fountain itself. I followed him, climbed up, stepped on a face, a bundle of 6 hands, an ass. The pool was black now. Not black like oil, but black like a cave, so that you couldn't see any reflection or ripples in the surface. Not even when Dr. Marconi waded out into it. A black rain fell off the angel's wings above us. John mounted the pile behind us, screaming, "Water!" Marconi, knee-deep in black oil, reached down and touched the icy surface of the statue. He said, "We ask you, Father, with your son." John had reached the end of his solo, was now making up a third verse to the song. "My hat smells like lubricant. I don't want to touch it. Wait, this isn't mine. And it's not a hat. Camel John's mic cable was cut. The sound died. "On the waters of this font, we ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen." Marconi stepped back. Nothing. John turned to the waves of approaching monsters and said, "Now lick the statue!" The blackness in the pool suddenly rose, covering the feet of the statue, spilling over the edges of the fountain. I leaned over and pulled up Marconi's jacket, pulling him back, not sure what was happening, but certain we didn't want to be standing in the middle of it when it did. He waded over to the edge of the pool. He raised one leg out of the blackness, and we saw with horror that he had no leg. Everything that had been submerged was gone, his pants ending in a neat line with only empty space beneath. And then it was back, whole again, like a trick of the light. The doctor suddenly sprang out of the pool with renewed motivation. I glanced nervously at my white patent leather shoes disappearing under the rising black tide. John and Jennifer helped us clamber up the wall of human limbs, and then we ran our asses off across the ballroom floor. There was a whistling sound, like wind howling through the tree branches. I saw a couple of chairs scooting along the floor toward the fountain, suddenly felt a pull like I was running from an electromagnet with a gut full of iron pellets. One of the wig monsters skittered toward us, but was suddenly lifted out of the air and sucked into what I was fairly certain was a portal to hell. The howling sound was loud now, deafening, the sound of a jetliner. Folding chairs were flying through the air as if propelled by dozens of invisible Bobby Knights. The 5 of us pushed our way forward. Somebody screamed around me, but the sound lost in the rushing noise. John grabbed my shirt and pointed me toward the small space behind the stage, room to crouch back there. Jennifer screamed something I couldn't hear, something that sounded like Todd. Sparks blew out from the ceiling lights, and we were cast into darkness. A few small banks of emergency lights clicked on, faintly glinting off the wings of the ice angel in the center of the room. We stumbled back behind the stage, huddled down like tornado victims. We waited. Silence. I risked a peek back at the dark well. From the blackness, there was movement. Dark shapes rose out of the portal. They were like freestanding shadows, vaguely human, long and lean figures, 8 or 10 feet tall each. Their only features were a pair of tiny, glowing eyes like 2 lit cigarettes. One by one, they slipped out into the dark room, a crowd of them, shoulder to shoulder, flowing out of the portal. They shambled out like a spreading pool of split oil, perfectly silent, filling the room, a constellation of little red flickering eyes. They were around us now, closing in just feet away, making their advance in perfect stillness. And then, the silence was broken. There was a low screeching sound like steam escaping. Plumes of smoke or steam rose from the base of the ice angel, a bright, white light down there like it was a rocket about to take off. The sound grew and grew and grew, became animal, a scream of pain. In the dim light of the emergency lamps, the holy water angel sank, descending into the black hole. There was a thunderclap, so loud I thought it would split me in half. I clenched my eyes shut, covered my head with my hands, begged God to forgive me for accidentally bringing an end to all of creation. There was a jolt, then a bodilessness, a weightless feeling that drifted out of a dream. A hand touched my shoulder. I flinched as if gouged with a branding iron. Things were quiet again. How much time had passed? I felt like a man waking after a nap to complete darkness, confused about the time of day. I opened my eyes and it was Jennifer, with John and Marconi standing behind her. Lights were on. She helped me up and I turned to the center of the floor. Nothing there but empty red carpet. No fountain, no bodies, no black hole. The room was completely vacant except for us and a few random toppled chairs still scattered about. I sat down on the floor, suddenly exhausted. John and I looked hard at the spot where the fountain had been. We had extended a hand toward it and gave it the finger. The doors burst open. Suits and cops' uniforms poured in. Molly the dog came bounding in with them, a bundle of chewed-up paper in her mouth. She dropped the stuff in front of me, barking her head off. I looked down at the 2 tickets to the Marconi show, which she had presumably gotten out of the young couple's luggage. I nudged the tickets aside, saw a CD labeled Amazing Grace, the Brooklyn Choir Sings the Gospel. A bearded man wandered over, looking dazed, and I recognized him as the husband of the woman we tried to save before they dismembered herself and everything went to hell. I said, "I'm sorry. About your wife. What was her name? Becky?" He looked at me, confused, said, "No, I'm not married. What happened in here?" I couldn't answer. I lay back on the floor, my body shutting down, even with these shoes shuffling all around me. I hadn't slept in 40 hours. Every muscle screamed in pain. I had fallen off the cliff of a gargantuan adrenaline rush and was crashing fast. Somebody said my name, asked if I was okay. I didn't answer, the sound of the commotion dying around me as the heavy monkey of sleep rested its warm, furry ass on my eyelids. Darkness and warmth, and then the nasal eek, eek, eek of an alarm clock. I had a taste in my mouth, smoky, like I had licked an ashtray. I felt something itchy and thick around my mouth. I shot my eyes open. Where the hell was I? I sat up in bed. Not my bedroom. I looked over at a watch on a nightstand. Not my watch. A nicer one. I looked around the room, the alarm still screeching its complaints from the nightstand. I found a mirror. There was something dark on my face, and I slapped my hand up to it. Hair. I climbed out of bed and walked toward the mirror. I had a thick, full goatee. What the hell? I sat heavily on the edge of the bed. Whose room was this? A voice from behind me said, "Are you going to get that?" I fumbled around and found a button on the alarm. Jennifer Lopez was in the bed, and I mean the actress. Oh wait, no. She rolled over and it was just the local Jennifer Lopez. She got out of bed wearing a tank top and underwear, and she sleepily walked off to what I guess was the bathroom. She had a faint white scar at the top of her thigh. She farted softly as she closed the door. I stood, found a cell phone among the stuff on a nearby chest of drawers, dialed John's number. Operator recording. This number has been disconnected. I was in a slow burn panic now. I glanced out a window, saw a tree in the front yard with leaves turning fall colors. I went back to the phone, scrolled through the quick dial numbers. I found an entry for John, a different number than I knew, and dialed it. I heard water running in the bathroom. I held my breath as the phone rang. 4, 5, 6 times. 7. "Hello?" John said, sounding sleepy. "John, it's me." Yeah, what's going on? Oh, nothing. After a moment, he said, You don't remember the last 6 months, do you? You too? No, I'm okay. This will be the fourth time it's happened to you, though. You lose everything since that night. Is Vegas the last thing you remember? Yeah. I think it's a side effect of the sauce. Come to my... Well, you don't know where my apartment is now, do you? Meet me at Dairy Queen. Jennifer came out, and much to my surprise, we kissed for several minutes. Ashtray. I went out, took in the neat little white bungalow-style house, and was a little relieved to find my familiar Hyundai in the drive. I drove and found John sitting on a bench outside the restaurant, a brown DQ sack in his hand. I observed that he, too, had grown a thick goatee. I said, This sucks. He said that every time. Do I have to, work today? Where do I work? Wally's. You get Sundays off. This is Sunday, by the way. Come on. John walked me to a very nice motorcycle. He jumped on, slapped the seat behind me. I looked at it for a moment, then walked to my car, said, I'll follow you. As we walked down the hall to John's new apartment, he said, It was a big deal, but not, the real big deal. The story that came out was that 500 people freaked out at a Marconi show, rushed the doors, one kid got killed on the stampede. That would be, Jim. We stepped through the doors, and I said, One guy? What about the dozens of people who... I stopped, taken aback by John's place. He had a brown leather couch, a matching armchair. He had a big screen plasma TV sitting in the middle of the room. Hooked to it were 4 video game systems, with game boxes littering the floor, a fairly nice DVD player, a 100-disc CD changer, and an entertainment center. John, are we crack dealers now? John opened a drawer on a writing desk and pulled out a big manila envelope. He extracted a bundle of papers, newspaper clippings, a couple of folded-up tabloids, a glossy magazine called Strange Days with a picture of a UFO on the front. He said, No, nothing like that. Out in Vegas, we met a guy. He was a pimp. We made quite a bit of money as male whores. They used to call you Rocket Rim Job. You won the gold at the Greater Nevada Sodomy Olympics back in July. Landed a bunch of endorsement deals. You own that house you and Jennifer live in. Paid cash, I think. He looked dead serious when he said this. I said, Are you messing with me? No, you really own that house. I made up the whoring thing, though. I like to add a little bit to it each time. Seriously, what happened is Molly won a bunch of money at the casinos. John. He pulled out a newspaper, a color lifestyle section from the Las Vegas Sun, headline blaring, Dog wins $250,000 playing slots. There was a picture of John with Molly in his arms, struggling to get away from him. He had his right hand out, making the shape of a finger gun, and pointed at Molly, his mouth wide open in a drunken, That's my dog expression. Jen and I were visible in the deep background, trying to hide our faces. The thing with the Marconi show, the panic. There was a big investigation and everything, he said. Cops thought he had slipped acid to everybody, freaked him out at a light show or something. Everybody called him a fraud. It was kind of crappy the way they treated him, but he came out okay. The death hasn't come out as anything but an accident, and all of a sudden his book is a bestseller. People desperate to get to his shows. You've, tried to contact him a couple of times, but he won't take the calls. It was coming back to me as he told it. Everything was hazy, drunk memories. He handed me the UFO magazine, pointed to a little header in the bottom left. Legend of Fred Shue. And this dead youth haunting his Midwestern hometown? One local man says, absolutely. There was a noise above me. I looked up. My heart skipped a beat. It was hanging off the ceiling on 7 little pink hands. The ridiculous thing's red wing was cocked on its head. It looked down at me, then let go and landed a few feet away with a soft thump. John? Oh, now you see it, he stood. Grabbed the Dairy Queen sack, pulled out a sausage and egg biscuit, and unwrapped it. He set the sandwich on the floor. The thing picked it up with 2 hands and bit into it. When you came in that night, the first night when I called you, it was standing on the wall. You walked in and of course you saw nothing at all, and, when I told you not to move or make a sound, the thing was on your back. It jumped on you and you just stood there like nothing. The wig monster turned about 5 eyes up to me as it ate. It paused in its chewing, vanished. The sandwich fell softly to the floor. I said, Did I spook it? I mean, does it, attack us or anything? No, not since that night. It bit right through my shoe that night, though. I've been kicking it at the time, so I call it even. The beast reappeared, one arm wrapped around a 32-ounce Coke. It had wrapped a straw in its beak. John pulled out the straw, unwrapped it, and poked it into the cup lid for it. The wig monster sucked on the straw and picked up its sandwich again. So, can anybody else see it? No. My mom came by last month, and it was right in the middle of the floor. She didn't acknowledge it at all, but get this, a week later, she left her cat here because she was going on vacation, and the cat could see it. Hissed at it the whole time. The monster would pick up wads of paper and stuff and throw it at him. The cat died the next day, but it was unrelated. I said, so the papers said we won $250,000. What did I do with my share? I bought that house. Did I save any? I don't know. We really don't see each other that much now. This is actually the first time we've talked since, so probably August. You and Jennifer, you don't leave the house a whole lot. Oh, I'm sorry, I guess? No, trust me, you're not. He gestured toward the television. Want to play hockey?